Hello, my name is Professor Saria Cherubalil Contractor. I am Professor in the Sociology of Islam at Coventry University. I am also a Coventry resident. I moved here in 2007 to be with my husband, who's an automotive engineer. And those of you who know Coventry will know that the car industry, with Jaguar, with Land Rover, with Morris, all of them had homes here. And so I very much feel that Coventry runs through my blood. Why is interfaith important? Partly because of the legacy of colonization. Britain today has become this melting pot of different cultures, different races, different ethnicities, and different faiths. Now, as we move to the future, if we are to develop into this resilient, strong country, we've got to be looking out for each other. Interfaith is not just about, different faith communities, living in their own silos. It is about us engaging with each other, understanding each other, respecting each other, and looking out for each other. I hope that our videos will show you how people in Coventry came here in the post-war period, in the aftermath of World War II. They came here partly to help rebuild the country. They also came here to build their own lives, and together they built Coventry. I am an academic, so I'll briefly mention the theorist Galtung. I do a lot of work in peace studies, and Galtung spoke about peace as not just being, the absence of war. That's not peace. He spoke about something called positive peace, where everybody cares about the well-being of their neighbor. So this film is about coming to Coventry. It tells the stories of people who arrived here in the post-war period, who had to build resources. They came here. Britain was a very different place. Now I'm going to take you back 60, 70 years. Britain was a very different place. There wasn't a lot of diversity. There weren't the mosques and the gurudwaras and the temples that we see now. There certainly weren't any of the Indian restaurants and the curries that we all love. There was racism. We've got to be able to talk about difficult things. And then in the post-war period, you had people from all over the world coming here to Coventry to build their lives here. And in this film, you'll hear from people who did just that.
I first came across Canon Peter Berry at an interfaith group meeting. Now, we used to get together in 63 Blackwell Street. I think those were the Franciscan sisters.
Yes.
And that is where many people used to come from different faiths. And they came because they were keen to know what other faiths stood for. Canon Peter Berry really impressed me because his aim was to make sure that as many people as possible came together and made sure that they understood the differences as well as the commonalities which bind us together. Very few people know that he was instrumental in setting up the first interfaith course at Coventry University, and I came to know about it because a librarian from one of our libraries actually attended it and said what a marvelous course it was.
And of course the interfaith group that was meeting in Vosel actually, I think, started not just with the Franciscan sisters but with the Reverend David Thomas from St Barnabas Church, didn't it?
Right.
And then he was succeeded by Reverend Shupriyo Mukherjee.
Yes.
Is that when St Paul's became quite big? Because I seem to remember as a youngster, we all went to St Paul's.
I think the thing about St Paul's is that so many of the congregation were Punjabi Christians whose relatives, like them, had arrived in Coventry from Punjab, from around Jalandhar, in, even the 1950s and 60s. So that was happening, and that I'm sure that the arrival of Christians of different backgrounds was also part of the widening of the thinking of the sort of white Christian community about the diversity of Coventry. Because so often in the story of the multi-faith Coventry, these communities are overlooked. The fact that there are Punjabi Christians, and for that matter, of course, for a long time, Cypriot Christians, Ukrainian Christians with places of worship, going, back into the 60s as far as I know, as well. And we tend to think of sort of Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, Christian, but there's so much diversity in the Christian population. And sadly, one of the roots of the so-called black-led churches like the First United Church of Jesus Christ Apostolic or the New Testament Church of God, they have their origins in the experience of people who'd grown up in usually Jamaica, in Coventry's case, as staunch Anglicans coming to this country, being smiled at by the vicar, and he or one of the congregation saying, "It's lovely to see you, but perhaps don't come again." And then they were so hurt. I remember one of my colleagues in the Minority Group Support Service telling me of his personal experience, and I've heard it, from others as well. This discovery that, we're not just regarded as fellow Christians, we're regarded as something different. And so their separate churches started. And a Christian priest was saying to me only the other day how the indigenous Christians of places like Coventry lost all that energy and goodwill and so on, which came with the Christians from the Caribbean.
You mentioned Canon Peter Berry, and of course he was a member of the cathedral staff.
Indeed.
And here you have a cathedral which has dedicated itself to reconciliation. Originally, of course, after the war between Germany and this country, but Peter Berry and others too could see that there was another task of reconciliation to be done between. You've covered some of the issues already between people of different skin colour and different faith backgrounds.
I want to mention two particular black church leaders.
Yes.
I want to mention Minister Dudley Nicely. You might have come across him, and Pastor Higgins.
Oh yes, Pastor Higgins.
They did
Gosh,
excellent
yes.
work.
Yeah.
These two churches, I believe, were set up by the Windrush generation. The early arrivals thought that they were going to get a wonderful welcome because they'd fought on the same side as Britain. When they started coming across discrimination in jobs, in employment, they weren't allowed to become members of trade unions and so on. They turned to churches for comfort. And I believe these two individuals whom I've just mentioned, they gave a lot of guidance and support to them. But another reason for the emergence of lots of black-led churches was the fact that people who came from Africa, people who came from the Caribbean, were used to a vibrant church service, okay? And so you see now a number of churches where services are really vibrant, the sort of services that they used to attend in their homelands.
Okay.
You've been in Coventry longest.
I have indeed, as a child. In fact, actually, they're the two elements of my identity that have actually stayed with me. I'm Coventrian, and I was born in a Sikh family. And actually, they've served me well in whatever I've done.
But you helped to build the mosque.
Indeed, I remember the story was told in our Gurdwara, but also in the masjid at the time. The masjid, while it was being built, sadly ran out of money. Our Pradhan felt very strongly that our Islamic colleagues should have somewhere to do nawaz and was embarrassed.
Pradhan means the president.
Pradhan is actually the president, the very first president, Tan Singh Hiriai. And I remember going with him and everybody else to the masjid, and it was very much a gentleman's agreement. Here's the money, whatever help you need, you can have. When you're ready, we'll sort it out. And I remember going every weekend, in Punjabi we'd call it et seva, brick service, and I used to hand it over to whoever was next in the queue until the masjid was built.
Very interesting that you mentioned that the Sikh community was instrumental in helping to build the Eagle Street Mosque. I was able to start, usually on United Nations Day, sometime in October, a walk between places of different
I guess
faiths.
we're still doing it now.
And
People-
it's been continued, I think, for a good many years now. One year, it must have been the late 80s or early 90s, I think. Peter Berry had come from Birmingham, where he had moved there to be Dean of the Cathedral in Birmingham. And so he and I and quite a group of people were moving from place to place. We found ourselves in the Eagle Street Mosque.
Indeed.
And the Imam Abdul Wahab Siddiqui was there. He and Peter Berry had knew each other very well, and to my surprise and to my delight, Imam Siddiqui asked Peter Berry to pray for the mosque and for our work in general as people of different faiths who met together. Now, that would not happen in every mosque. For a Christian priest to be invited to pray, and therefore to pray in the name of Jesus, as we always do, in a place where the understanding of the person of Jesus, though it's very respectful, is very different from the Christian understanding. And I think that goes back to the experience in the Eagle Street Mosque itself of having been built partly by Sikh labour.
Indeed, I was going to say Canon Peter Berry was a regular at the Wudar at GMP. I used to find it amazing.
Guru Nanak Prakash.
Absolutely. I used to find it amazing that an English person spoke Punjabi so well, and it was posh Punjabi as opposed to and
Tate Punjabi.
yeah, absolutely. He was amazing, and the impact he had on all our lives. I mean, people say words don't matter, but they do. Just the way he talked about working together, that we had common interests.
Now in this video you will have seen how different people who came to Coventry, who made Coventry their home, you will have heard from them, you will have heard of their stories, their challenges, the difficulties they faced, but also their triumphs. You know, how did they build this city from a place that was unfamiliar, that was strange, that lacked in anything that bore even the slightest resemblance to home. They actually built that city, they forged it and they made it home. And home is really important. Now in building the city, in making it their home, you will have also heard of, you know, cross-religious, cross-cultural, cross-fertilizations. And those relationships of strength, of trust, of belief came to shape the interactions that we continue to see in our city today. My son, who is 10, in his little friend group, he used to have a little Sikh lad who sadly now moved, a little white lad of no religious identity, and a little Christian girl. They're inseparable, they love each other, and that's the kind of city that our forefathers and people who came here in the 50s and the 60s, that's the kind of city they built for us. Now the Prophet Muhammad, and I'm a Muslim, right, and Muslims, there's a lot of emphasis on charity, but and you know, people might think, oh, charity is big money, or you know, doing a cross-country run to gather, fundraise. But what Prophet Muhammad taught us was even a smile is charity. And in those early days, there was a profusion of smiles. And I hope that this video has made you smile, and you can take the smile beyond this video into your everyday lives.